difficulties. Karen Marchetti here. This time on dual process, Jodi Robinson and I are working on a chunky blocks quilt. Just a bunch of different squares sewn together. So we both have a couple ideas for you. We'll both share a simple version and then a more complex version. So grab your printable and let's get started. Hey guys, it's Karen again. So for my simple version, I'm just kind of doing a squiggly line. If you want to add more to it or make it a straight line, you can, but I'll tell you why I like the squiggly line, because it's very forgiving. I usually don't mark my centers, but if you want to mark your centers of your blocks, you can, go through and mark them. I just kind of wing it. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to assume that I can probably quilt all this in one roll. So I'm going to start up here. Let me get rid of this line. I'm going to start up here, top left corner, and I'm just going to kind of do a squiggle. When I get to about center, I'm going to do a loop, 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 and then squiggle on out to that corner. If I had done straight lines, this is why I like squiggly lines, because if I had done straight lines and I'm a little bit off, it's so pronounced with a straight line. But with a little squiggly line, it's just forgiving. I mean, you can even do little loops if you want to, like that. Adds a little bit more. So from here, I'm gonna just squiggle up to here, do my 4 loops, squiggle up to the corner, and squiggle down to here. Now, with these are a little bigger, if you need to mark it, go ahead and mark it in the rectangles. But it's the same process. Squiggle to the center, 4 loops, squiggle out. Then I would cut through my seam, this edge of the quilt, and then come back. Now we'll just squiggle back to this one, cut through the center of the loops, back down through this one, back up, and back down. So now we're going to repeat that right here. Now we're here, our needle's still down. Squiggle to the center, 4 loops, squiggle to the corner, and we'll just keep doing this, repeating it. Now, I don't want to cut through my seam line here. So what I'm going to do is I'll come back for this one in a minute. You'll see. From here, I'm going to do this rectangle, 4 loops, and then this square, and up. So now I'm going to go over through this one, come back down this one. I'm just trying to keep it super continuous. Now that I'm up here, I can do this large one. And the large one, I'm doing an echoed loop, just because it's a bigger space and I just want to add a little more to it. Again, that's total personal preference. If you just want to do single loops, that's fine too. So again, I'll cut across the edge of my quilt, come up this side, go back through the center of the large square, and then we can continue through these last 2. Super simple, right? So then we'll advance the quilt and we'll still have that needle down, and then we'll continue on this section, which is actually the reverse. It's kind of just rotated of the top half. Come down, loop, 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 loop. And of course, if I were quilting these, they would be much neater. Drawing is not always the neatest thing. Echoed loop. Whoops, got a little crazy there. So from here, I'll do this rectangle, squiggle out to the corner, loop, 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 cut through, finish my squiggles. Now again, I don't want to travel, so I'm going to do this block. And we'll catch that one on the way back. And usually if you miss something, you'll be able to catch it again. If not, you just tie off and tie back on. Whatever works. And don't freak out if you miss something. So now we're in this corner and we can go this way. Whoops. I didn't erase too much there. Okay, so now we'll go back up and finish the large square and the rectangle. Again, needles here. Come down and do this little square. And then the rectangle. And then the square. And then that last square. Travel through the seam of the quilt. And then come back and finish the squiggle lines. And that quilt is done. Super fast, and it has a good amount of quilting, but there's still some nice open soft spaces. So I'll see you back here in a couple minutes for my more complex version.
Hi everyone, it's Jodi. In this episode, we're working with the Chunky Blocks quilt, and so this is my idea for a simple quilting plan for this quilt, and I'm going to go with spirals on this. I mean, I hope you guys will give it a try because I use this a lot. I love spirals because they don't have to be perfect. It gives great texture and it goes really nice and fast. And so what I'm going to do, I mean, for me, when I look at this quilt, I kind of visualize that it's kind of these 4 big blocks. So I'm pretty confident that we can reach like this whole row up here, and then we'll do this one as a whole, which is going to make it a little easy as far as traveling through the quilt. But again, you know, sometimes doing these spirals, if you haven't used them a lot, you might find yourself, you know, stuck in a corner or like, oop, I don't have anywhere to go. And that's really not the end of the world. It's quite easy to just, you know, hit stop, tie off, and then resume. That's fine. I think, you know, the more that you do this style of quilting, that just will be, the flow will become easier. So to get started, we are just going to start in the top left here. And what we're going to do is just add, you know, a nice freehand spiral. You can certainly, if you'd like, go in, do your little spiral, back out, and then on to the next one. But I'm going to spiral in and then zip straight out to the next area. I like the way it forms the little, so let me just do one real quick here. So if I do it, I like this little shape that it makes. And you kind of notice that in the quilting because those are the centers are the only piece that are kind of closed shapes. And I think it really adds to the texture and the interest. So here we go. Let's just start. Doesn't really matter, top, left, bottom, whatever. And we're just going to go in here and do each square, whatever size it is, it's going to get a spiral. So we're going to come in, spiral in. When I get done, can't fit anymore, and I go out. You can go up, down, whichever. I kind of do try to alternate so they don't all end up starting in the same place. Right out here, spiral. Now the ideal situation too is that somewhere along the line here, you do want to do a spiral that's going to catch the seam. You don't have to do every one, but you don't want those, you know, when you get done to kind of have these little bumps where all the seams are. So it's nice if you can hit one. So here I'm going to kind of make sure that I try to end so that I can zip right down into this one and work my way back. And then see, this one's bigger, so it's just going to get bigger. And depending on the density of the quilting you like. Now here, we have options. You can go to either one. It really isn't going to matter. I'm going to go to the top one. But what I was going to say, the density, you can make these tighter or looser. That totally depends on you. And I'm just going to keep going until I fill this whole area. It's a little sloppy here. And then see, I didn't do enough, but that's okay. I'm just going to come down here and go out there. So at this point, of course, I would tie off. I'm going to advance the quilt, and then we're going to do the same thing in the bottom section. Again, I'll just start wherever, start at the top here, and I'm just going to spiral across, filling in each of these blocks here and there, making sure to grab the seam. And I'll just continue doing that until the whole next section is filled. So now that we're coming to the end, you'll see I did exactly what I was mentioning in the beginning. I found myself in this block needing to come out the bottom, and here I am finding myself stuck. Well, not really stuck. I'm at the end. But because we're at the edge of the quilt, that's fine. I don't even need to tie off. I would just stitch down along the edge, across the bottom, and carry on. And that finishes the quilt. So it goes really nice and fast. I mean, even if you have like a huge king size quilt, if it fits the quilt, and I would say fabrics, color scheme, maybe what your client wants, this is a really great way to quilt this quilt. So I'll see you next on my more complex design for this same quilt.
Okay, so on my more complex version, I've gone ahead and just drawn some, these would be markings in chalk on a quilt, but I've just made some markings on the quilt to divide these into these certain blocks into four triangles. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, right here, and I'm going to make a curl, come down my seam line, curl, come down my seam line. So it's almost like a little faux ditching. Okay, on the seam line to a curl, and we're just filling that triangle down the seam line. And again, if we were quilting, it would be much neater. And I'm just filling it with 3 little swirls. So I'm here, I'm going to cut back through that seam line and just kind of do a large continuous curve. Now I'm going to fill this with just little curls, little swirls, just like we just stitched. Just filling that in. Now I'm here. I'm going to start again with my little swirlies, filling those triangles. Again, stitching in that seam line. And the reason I'm stitching in that seam line is so that when I need to cut through, it's there already. Because I'm not going to ditch the entire quilt. I'm kind of ditching it as I'm stitching. That's why I call it faux ditching. And if I only cut through, then some of them would be ditched and some wouldn't. So that's why, as I'm doing my swirlies or swirls, curls, I'm kind of ditching in the line as I go. But it's not true ditching. But that way, if I need to cut through, it gives me a place. And again, I'm going to cut through and do that continuous curve. Now fill that with the swirls. And I like to vary the shape, wow, no, they're all swirls. I like to vary the sizes of them because it just adds a little more interest. Little tiny ones, bigger ones. And again, this would be much neater if we were stitching. drawing on a digital whiteboard, it's slippery. I don't know if you've not experienced it or not, but when you draw on a digital whiteboard, which is, you know, your computer screen, the pen, it just glides. So it is very slippery. Again, staying in that ditch and just traveling along. So now I'm right here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and from here, I'm gonna do the continuous curve and fill in this block, but I wanna end up back here. So what I'm gonna do is kind of fill in a weird direction. I'm not, you know, filling from one side to the other. I'm going down one side, and then I'll come back up the other side. Oops. So now I can do again, but this is a big block. So when I do my swirls, I'm going to actually put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swirls in the bigger block. So 1 down that seam line, 2 down the seam line, 3 seam line, 4 seam line, 5 into the corner, and then repeat that all the way around, making sure to stitch that seam line as I go. And now we'll come up here and fill in this section with the swirlies. I'm going to cut through again with the continuous curve here, filling this with the little swirls. And then again, we're back to the square. So it'll be 3 swirls, stay in that ditch. Up this one. Cut back through, one more continuous curve. Now I want to aim for over here because that way I can go right into my next one. And that, you just get better with that as you quilt it. You'll know in the path where you want to start and stop. It just makes traveling a little bit easier. So now again, swirl, 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 down, swirl, swirl, swirl. Now I'm going to stop right here for a second because I might as well fill this one while I'm here. So we're going to do that continuous curve. Now remember, I want to come back to this corner. So I'll fill this way. And head back to that corner so I can finish with my little swirls. Okay, so then I would tie off or stitch down to here because now I'm going to quilt this half. So I'll continue through this in fast forward. It's the same concept we just did. If there's no X marked, it's the continuous curve. And if the X is marked, it's the swirls. So I will see you back here in a minute when I'm finished drawing this out. Okay, so it is done. Then I would go and erase. Hopefully I'm just erasing my marking lines. Oops, I knew it. I knew it. But I wanted you to see what it looks like without the marking lines there. But they really do make your life easier to keep those curls only in the triangles. And there we go. So that is the more complex version. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you try some of these out.
Hi everyone, it's Jodi, and this is going to be a little more complex design idea for this chunky blocks quilt. And in this version, I don't want to say that it's necessarily more difficult to stitch. We're going to do something very simple, but that can be very effective, especially on a quilt like this. Not always, but in general, I find that these style quilts usually have a lot of prints in them, which makes them kind of busy, you know, and while we do have these individual blocks and on here they appear solid, generally there are probably going to be some prints in there. And that makes it hard because sometimes your quilting just is really hard to make show. So we're going to use kind of a curvy, continuous curve design. And what we're going to strive to do is just kind of create some texture and relief that you'll be able to see without actually needing to be able to see the actual quilting designs. So that's why you might choose something as simple as this, because if you can't see it anyway, you probably wouldn't want to go crazy with quilting and like feather everything when you're not going to see it anyway. So what we're going to do, like the simple version, we did one thing in each of these blocks, and we're going to do the same thing this time. And we're just simply going to travel. And there are a couple different ways, and I'll show you as we go the different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to use this continuous curve that is like, so when I stitch it in my head, I'm always kind of repeating big and small, big and small, big and small, big, small. And you want to keep that pattern. And I'm just going to work my way across here. Now on these bigger ones, generally what I like to do is try to stay, do the same design, but I do want to try to stay close. I don't want to make these shapes right here too big because they're not going to be quilted. Whoop. And now that I'm over here, I'm going to work my way back across to close the bottoms. And as I do that, so by closing them, I mean right here, I've closed this shape. And at this point, I want to come in here and put a fill. So this is where you have some options. You can use any fill that you love, or like to do, or enjoy doing, because it's really just going to act to smush down the center a little bit and make these shapes stand out. So, that's entirely up to you. The other thing is the density of it. If you want these to be really flat in the centers, you can just do a really tight fill. I used loops when I did mine. So I've closed that shape in. I'm going to fill it in with loops, back out, and carry on. I'm just going to do this one, and I'm going to come in again, fill this one in, out, into the next one, close it, do my fill, and continue. Now, I'm not going to do these end ones because when we finish this whole pass that we can reach, then we'll close in this. So I'm just going to continue into this next one. You could certainly do this as well with just regular continuous curve like this. But I think the little swoopy, curvy line gives it a little more movement. So now you see, I don't want to do this one because we're now to this bigger block. So I'm going to just skip that. And what I'm going to do is travel down here. And now I'm going to do this as a big one. So this same shape, it just got bigger. And I'll do the same thing. I close that in, come in and fill. Close that one, fill. Now we're here, so I need to remember I'm actually just going to travel back up here. And then I'm going to finish these ones. And we'll take care of those other two in 1 second here. I'm going to fill. Here. And then at this point, I am just going to do these ones. We go back to a long one. And I'm going to fill. And we're right where we need to be to finish these sides before we roll. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one in. And so now we'll fill this one. Close that one in, fill. Oop, went out the wrong way. I just sneak through here and fill. We just want to make sure we can get out. And then I tie off. And then I would go ahead and advance the quilt. And I'm going to do the same thing across this bottom pass. Start right about here. Just remember them. Well, I mean, you can think whatever you want as you stitch it. Maybe you don't need to, but I do always kind of need to repeat something in my head. And then I'm going to try to go ahead here and see what I can do here. I don't think, I'm going to go ahead and just finish this one, and I'll grab that other one. See, at this point, if you pause right here, I actually could come in here and because I'm going to be traveling on, I would go ahead and just fill this one because I'm already here and it's kind of the oddball, you know, these ones are kind of like offset. I can also go ahead and finish this one. The nice thing about continuous curve is because you stitch the curves actually in passes, you always kind of have extra chances if you've missed one somewhere, which I really like. Now, again, close them in. And I'll just continue to fill the rest of this in. And that brings us to the bottom of the quilt. We've finished all the quilting. And I mean, if you know, looking at this, because we have these nice open shapes in here, and then the fill is pressing down the centers, it's going to give you some really nice texture and interest because of the different shapes. So I think it's Well, the fill does make it take a little longer. It's not a whole lot of time. And I think, it's a great effect, especially if you have a busy quilt. So I hope it's something you might give a try. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed today's designs, and be sure to join us for the next episode of Dual Process.